everybody, it's Terry with Crafty Book Nerd here today to talk about the books I read for September and also tell you a little bit about my reading plans for October. I had a very good reading month in September. I finished 9 books, so I was pleased with that. And we're going to talk about them, and I'll try to keep them brief so this video won't be too long. But first, you know what time it is. Time for our quote of the day. And today's quote says, "Something very magical can happen when you read a good book." And it's very appropriate because I did read quite a few fantasies this month. So September was Series September, which is my second year to do that, where you start a series, read another book in a series, or you finish a series. So that was my main focus. However, 2 of my favorite authors came out with the books, and I had to get those. And one of them was a book of the month, and the other one, I can't believe I got it so quick. I put it on hold at the library. So I want to talk about those 2 books first. Let me get a sip of my coffee. This is called Salted Caramel. I just came back from Europe about a month ago and went to a wonderful tea shop and got this really cute little mug and some flavored coffees. And this salted caramel, I'm telling y'all, it's the bomb. So good. So let's talk about it. So the first one by one of my very, very favorite authors that I plan to read to zero, and that is By Any Other Name by Jodi Picoult. I was so excited to know that she was coming out with another book. And this one was very interesting. Anytime she comes out with a book, I'm going to read it right away. So let's talk about it. Here's the setup. We have 2 women who are living 400 years apart. And both of them want to be playwrights in a man's world. So it's very difficult for them. First, we have Amelia, who is living in Elizabeth, England in the 1600s. She is a real person and was actually the first English published poet. Then we have Melina, who lives in New York 400 years later, and she finds out that she is a descendant of Amelia. And so she decides to research her descendant and write a book about her because, actually not a book, a play. She wrote a play about her because she was the first woman playwright. And as Melina is doing research and writing this book, she learned some interesting things about her descendant. And she begins to think that Amelia may have been more than just a playwright. So the story goes back and forth between the 2 of them with all the things that are going on with them. And then we have an interesting character that enters the story, and that's William Shakespeare. And I'm not going to tell you anything else because you need to read it. It is a chunker at 544 pages, and I felt that maybe it could have been shortened a little bit. There were times I kind of got lost in some of it, but it was so interesting. And if you want to know about this real person and what her relationship was to William Shakespeare, you need to check out this book. As usual, Jodi Picoult does her research, and it's just, she makes you think about things. I started doing research on William Shakespeare after I finished this book because I wanted to learn more, and it was just so good. I gave it 4 stars, and don't forget to check out the author's notes too because that was very interesting. So that was the first one. The second one that I wanted to read and picked it for my book of the month actually is Here One Moment by Leanne Mortery. She wrote Big Little Lies, was made into a movie, and several others that I've read. And actually I got this one, but then I ended up listening to the audio, and I really enjoyed the audio because of the different characters' voices. And at times it was confusing a little bit about who was who and their relationships to each other, but the audio helped me to keep that straight. So let's set this one up. A passenger plane, there are people on the plane, going back home, and there's one strange woman on the plane. She's just an ordinary woman, nothing special about her, but all of a sudden once the plane takes off, she stands up in the aisle and she starts going around to people and she points at them and she says, cause of death, and she tells them something. Age of death, and she tells them the age they're going to die. Some of the people on the plane just laugh it off. They think, oh, this woman is crazy. We don't know what's going on with her. And so, they let it go. But there are 6 passengers on this plane whose lives are changed because of this woman's predictions. So the way the story works is we follow each of the 6 characters as they're trying to deal with the prediction that she gave them about cause of death and age of death. And then we also get a glimpse into the person who made, and I can't even remember her name all of a sudden, I've just gone brain dead, what her name is, the lady that tells them all this. They call her the Death Lady, and I can't even find what her name was. But anyway, we'll just call her the Death Lady. And it talks about her and how her life led up to that moment when she got on that plane and gave those predictions to the people. So that was interesting. So the question for you is, if you knew what was going to be the cause of your death and how old you were going to be when you died, would you do things differently? I personally think I would. So that was a very interesting premise. It deals with grief and love and free will, and I just really enjoyed it. And it was another chunker, and I am glad I listened to the audio. And I think I'll probably read it. I've listened to it, and I think I'm going to go back probably and read this again just to get more clarification. So I was really excited to read both of those books. And so those were the 2 books I read that were not part of Series September. And this one was another 4-star for me. I had a really good reading month. So now let's talk about Series September. Let's see. In Series September, I read a whole series of 3 books, read them all, binge read them, actually listened to all 3 of them. I started, I think, 2 new series. I read a second book in a series. So it was really good, knocking out some series and starting some new ones. So let's talk about those. The first book is actually an older book that came out in 2015, and a friend of mine had told me about it, and it sounded really interesting, and so I picked up the first one, and that's The 7 Sisters by Lucinda Riley. And there's a picture of the first book. And like I said, this is an older one. It came out in 2015, and there are 7 books, 7 sisters, 7 books. They've all been released, and so I'm excited to move on to each one of those. So let's talk about this one a little bit. In this one, we have a main character whose name is Paul Salt, and he is a very wealthy man. And he goes around the country adopting young orphan girls, and he brings them home to his wealthy place where he lives. He's very rich, to Lake Geneva. And they grow up together. Well, something happens to him, and all the girls are now grown, but they all have to come back to the home they were raised in. And they each begin to question why he chose them, where they came from, what's their heritage. So book 1 deals with the first sister. And then we have book 2, the second sister, third sister, and so on. I was really invested in the first sister's story and learning about her, and I've just really enjoyed it. And I'm looking forward to learning more about the other sisters. And this one was another 4-star read. Really enjoyed it. After that one, I started a new series, and I'm not even sure where I heard about this one. And that's called The Liar's Crown by Abigail Owen. And I was really interested because I knew it was a series, but I didn't know how many books there were. I thought there were just 2. And I read the first one, and it ended on a cliffhanger, and I was ready for the second one, which I haven't started yet, but I will soon. And then I found out in November of 24, there's going to be a 3rd one. And so I'm interested in reading that. So this one is considered a YA romance fantasy. And if you've been on my channel for a while, you know that I really do like fantasies. The romance, it's part of it. It's okay, but it's the fantasy part that I really enjoy. However, I do think it leans more to older, like maybe 15, 16, 17. I'm not sure I let a 13 or 14-year-old read it. Depends on their maturity level, because there were a few scenes I felt were inappropriate. So in this fantasy, there are two sisters who were twins. We have Marion, who is the twin to Tabor, who is heir to the throne. But nobody knows that Marion exists. They do not know that Tabor has a twin. So Marion's life is very, I wouldn't say boring, but it's almost like she has to hide because people can't see her, because if they see her, they're going to think she's the sister, which she isn't. She's the twin. So that's, how her world's working on. So anyway, and her job, Marion's job, is to keep her sister safe. Well, something happens and things take a turn in the kingdom, and Marion has to figure out a way to save her sister. There were some bad guys in this fantasy, and I kind of liked the bad guys. This was also an audio that I listened to, and I really enjoyed that. And Marion comes face to face with someone called a Shadow Ranger, and his name is Revan. And I could feel the tension. I could hear it in the characters' voices in the audiobook, the tension between Marion and Revan. So the story continues with the two of them and what Marion has to do to save her sister, and how far will she go to save her sister. I gave this one 4 stars. Can't wait for the second one. And the third one's coming out in November. This may be a series that I have to purchase because I really did like it. It was very good. So the next one I did was the second book in a series that I started, and that's from Pages and Company. And the second one is The Lost Fairy Tales, and that's by Anna James. This is a middle school book, and if you have a middle school person in your life, I highly suggest the series. I think there's 6 books in it, and this was book 2 for me. I really enjoyed it. It was a fast read, went by quickly. And in this book, just like the first one, our main character is Tilly, and Tilly is what they call a book wonder. That means that she can travel into stories, and that's what she does. And in this one, she travels with her friend Oscar to the fairy tales, because there's something weird going on with the fairy tales. The fairy tale people are not doing what they're supposed to be doing, so the fairy tale can end the way it's supposed to. And so there's some issues going on. And so Tilly goes in there, and she is trying to figure out how she can save the fairy tales before it is destroyed. I love the fantasy element. I love the time travel. I love the friendship between Tilly and Oscar, and I'm looking forward to diving into book 3. This was another, I think I gave this one, I gave this one 3 stars. I think if I would have read it as a middle grader, probably 4, so between 3 and 4 stars. I enjoyed it. The next one I read was, I'm looking at my notes, another new series, and I think I was in Books A Million, and I saw these 2 books, and I just love this color and this cover. It's called Light Lark by Alex Astor. And Alex is not a male. She is a female. And I loved this cover. And there was this one, and then there was the second one. And I bought them both a while back. I can't remember when it's published, but it's a bit of an older book. Let's see if I can see when it was published. Actually 2022, so not that old. And so I wanted to read these. So I started with this one. And when I finished it, I was thinking about starting the second one, and I was looking on Goodreads, and I noticed that there's a third book again, a third one coming out in this series, also in November of 24. And this may be another one that I buy. So let's set up what's going on in this book. So there's an island of Lark, and Lark only appears every 100 years, and it only stays appeared for 100 days. And there are 6 kingdoms, and each of the rulers from those different kingdoms go to the island where they play a deadly game, and they're trying to break curses and gain power. Once again, another fantasy that I really enjoyed. Each of the 6 leaders have secrets. They have something to hide. And what are they willing to risk? And what are they willing to do to break these curses and gain power? Once again, this one is advertised as a YA, and there are some scenes in here that I think are more appropriate for older teenagers. The main character in this one is a young lady named Isla, and she's actually one of the youngest rulers over her kingdom. And throughout this book, she is trying to figure out a way that she can save her realm. I noticed that this series got some mixed reviews. A lot of people didn't like it, but I did. I'm just a sucker for fantasy and magic and kingdoms and rulers and love and betrayal and all those fun things that you might find in a fantasy. So I really did enjoy it, and I will continue with the series, and it was another 4-star read. And then the very last one that I did was an audio, and it was called the Darkwood Trilogy. And I think it was like 40 hours. And I was like, man, that is a long book. But then I realized that the audio was all 3 books. There's actually 3 books in the series, and the audio, you listen to the first one, then the second one started, and the third one started. And that was great because the first and second one ended on a cliffhanger, and I would have had to wait to get the book from somewhere. So I had all of it at one time, and I just binge listened to it every chance I got. I did not want to stop listening. So it's called the Darkwood Trilogy, and there's 3 books, and it's by Athena Sharp. And the first one is called, and these covers are gorgeous, White as Frost. That's the first one. And the second one is Black as Night. Black as Night. I might have had a little glitch there. I think my battery's dying. Black as Night. And the third one is Red as Flame. So the ones I listened to, like I said, it was all 3 books. And if you notice on here in all the covers, there's white and red flowers, because this book reminds you of Rose Red and Snow White. We have 2 young ladies in this book. We have Rose, whose mother marries a king, and he has a daughter named Neve, which becomes Rose's stepsister. And in book 1, they are not getting along very well. Rose is very jealous of Neve because she's a princess, and Rose is just a common girl. And Neve has magic, and Rose has always wanted magic. So there's a little bit of rivalry going on between them. And so that's what goes on in book 1, and Rose learns about the Darkwood and what all that means. So it kind of setting a lot of things up in book 1. In book 2, the adventure continues as Neve makes some decisions that are not very good for the people of the kingdom. And Rose must pick up the pieces and risk her own life to save her sister, who now they have a better relationship in book 2, which I was happy to see. And then in book 3, Neva is trapped, and Rose must figure out what to do next. In book 3, Rose comes into her own. She grows, she learns some things about herself. There are some surprises in book 3, and she learns what she's really capable of. I just enjoyed the whole thing. It was magical. It was suspenseful. There was romance. There was surprises, the relationship between the 2 sisters. And I'm so glad I listened to it all at one time because I absolutely loved it. And I gave it 4 stars. It seems like everything I read this month, I gave 4 stars. It was so good. I really enjoyed it. So that was my reading for September. And I'm going to be really brief and tell you what I'm doing for October. So, for October, I'm doing what's called the Trick or Treat TBR. And there are all of these prompts, and the goal is to get as many of these as you can. You can read one book, and it can count as many or just one. And this is hosted by Leandra, the TBR0, and what I will do is I will link that in the description box. So if you're interested in getting this, you can visit her site and you can print it. But just a few of the things, say like it's got a cat on the cover, a pumpkin on the cover, it's mysterious, there's vampires, it's a reread, it's historical, it's a fairy tale, there's a family in it, it's a cozy book, there's a hot drink on the cover. So, I think it's going to be so much fun. And I actually have all my books picked out. So if you want to find out how many of these I actually finish and which ones I get done, then make sure you come back at the end of October to see that video. So that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. And if you're new to my channel, welcome, welcome. Love to have you as a subscriber. I'm a little over 500 now, and that makes me excited, working my way to the 1,000 mark, hoping to get there soon. So thanks again for watching, and stay tuned soon for the next video.